Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. This is the 34th episode of the Making Sense series, and it is from www.central-mosque.com and the Humble Heart YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss, did General Zia-ul-Haq of Pakistan butcher and kill Palestinians? I had to delete the earlier recording because the voice wasn't clear, so I'm going to try this again. And plus, I'm not feeling too well. So, inshallah, let's hope that this goes well. Before we dive into the subject, President or General Zia-ul-Haq of Pakistan is a controversial person, and opinions are divided. Some really praise him and don't want to hear anything negative about him because they believe him to be the person who, introduced you know various practices of Islam into the Pakistani society, and that is true because I grew up under him, went to school under his rule, etc., under the martial law of President Zia-ul-Haq. There are others who say he decimated, destroyed the Pakistani society, destroyed democracy, hung Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the father of Benazir Bhutto, etc., and they hate him with a passion, and they think that he never did anything good. That some of those are also true. So I'm not going to dive into this video about that at all. I want to specifically focus on the allegation, which can quite easily be found when, if you Google it, they're saying he butchered and killed a lot of Palestinians, etc. There's evidence, there's overwhelming evidence people present to support that claim, and there are others who say no, he didn't do that. So we're just going to talk about that aspect, and that's it, and not generally dive into President Zia-ul-Haq. He has passed away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive him his sins and grant him a high rank in paradise. And whatever he did or didn't do, let's leave it to Allah ta'ala. Before I dive into what President Zia-ul-Haq in the 70s did or didn't do, it's important for you to understand the history, a few decades before that, and to see what led to those claims. So first of all, this is Hussein bin Ali. So in 1908, the Ottoman Empire appointed him as the Sharif of Makkah. So in 1908, it was done by, Khalifa Abdul Hamid Khan. And by this time, the Ottoman Empire was already declining. However, in 1916, as the Sharif of Makkah, he rebelled against the Khalifa, he rebelled against the Ottoman Empire, and we now know this was done at the behest and the full support of the British Empire. And he rebelled and he claimed himself to be the king of Hijaz. Hijaz at that point, roughly, you can think of the areas what we know of the holy cities of Muslims, Makkah and Medina, etc. So he proclaimed himself to be the king of Hijaz and openly revolted against the Ottoman Empire. 1924, when the Ottoman Empire came to an end, he went one step further and proclaimed himself to be the Khalifa of all the Muslims. The next year, 1925, the Saudis threw him out. So the Khalifa went into exile in Cyprus and other areas, etc. He had two sons. One of them, this person right here, Abdullah I of Jordan. A few years later, he proclaimed to be the king of Transjordan, roughly what we today call the country of Jordan. His brother, Faisal I, proclaimed to be the king of Iraq. So basically, one thing I forgot, this family claims to be from the lineage of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Specifically, he claimed to be the 31st direct descendant of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Today, there is enough evidence to throw doubt at that. The British propped up this guy and his sons and everybody who came, even to this day. The present ruler of Jordan has very good relations with British. So the British backed these guys up to the hilt against the Ottomans and to divide the Muslim Ummah. So when we come to this guy, Abdullah I of Jordan, he basically, as I said, claimed and established rule over Transjordan area, and his brother Faisal first in Iraq, Faisal I in Iraq. When this Abdullah first passed away, Talal bin Abdullah took over, but this guy had schizophrenia and various personality disorders. We also now know that he consumed large amounts of alcohol, and it was clear that there's no way that he could have ruled the Jordan area. So within a few months, although it was tried to keep him on the throne, but he couldn't, so he had to abdicate and step down. In comes Hussein bin Talal. So Hussein bin Talal then became the king of Jordan and also areas of West Bank, which was still under the ruleship of Jordan. One of his cousins, Faisal, ruled areas of Iraq. This is Faisal 2, not Faisal 1. Faisal 2. So basically, you had cousins, this guy in Jordan, this guy in Iraq. But what happened is, as what happens with dictators, dictators really have no support within the people. So in July 1958, the military of Iraq overthrew this guy, King Faisal, and across in Jordan, he witnessed what happened to his cousins. So, as usually happens with dictators, he was scared and he knew that his support wasn't within the people, but his support, King Hussein's support, was in the Bedouins of Jordan, which the British used against the Ottomans with quite a bit of success. So he was watching his population for signs of rebellions, etc., and ready to crush. What happened in the 1960s is two events that happened. Is number one, this woman from Pakistan, she was from Karachi, Sarwat Ikramullah. She married Prince Hassan bin Talal of Jordan. This was a dream wedding, quite publicized all over the world. That this girl from Pakistan becomes a princess of Jordan, etc. So Jordan and Pakistan came quite close. Secondly, the king of Jordan, he was seeing seeds of rebellion within his population. So he reached out to Pakistan, which had good military, to actually start sending military personnel for training and for other reasons over to Jordan. So Pakistan military or army specifically sent Brigadier Zia-ul-Haq. Here he is pictured in 1970 in Jordan as a trainer for the Jordanian forces. Let me bring in another thread. On the other side, while Jordan and Pakistan are developing this relationship, etc., the Palestinians under Yasser Arafat were reaching out to India. So at that time, Yasser Arafat had very good relationship with India as opposed to Pakistan, specifically with Indira Gandhi. So let me tell you that none of this has anything to do with Islam. These are basically pan-Arab sentiments, loyalties and disloyalties within the Arabs themselves. None of this has anything to do with Islam, actually. So what happened is the Arabs were quite comprehensively being beaten and defeated by by Israelis. I apologize. And what happened is the Palestinians saw this and they were dejected by constant Arab defeats. Arabs, while being defeated by Israel, were reaching out to Israel for good relations. So Jordan had already established those relations starting in 1948, etc. Palestinians saw that. They saw the Arabs were being militarily defeated and reaching out to Israel. So Yasser Arafat at that time thought, so he had, they were trying to militarily fight Israel in the 60s and 70s. Yasser Arafat thought, he goes, this is going to be impossible without having some kind of territory or having some kind of a homeland. So when he looked across the Arab world, he saw Jordan, and a large proportion of Jordanian population was actually either directly of Palestinian descent or one generation removed from being of Palestinian ancestry. So Yasser Arafat thought that maybe if we can take over some parts of Jordan, we will have a homeland, we'll have a territory from which to launch our military struggle against Israel. So skirmishes between Jordanian military, Jordanian paramilitary services, Jordanian police, etc., and Palestinian militia backed by Yasser Arafat started. And this was one of the reasons also why Jordan reached out to Pakistan. And however, there was another figure, very, very prominent figure in the 60s, late 60s, specifically in the Middle East, and this was Jamal Abdel Nasser. So Jamal Abdel Nasser was a very big, he proposed pan-Arab unity. So once again, remove Islam from your eyes. This has nothing to do with Islam. These are Arabs just trying to, there's various powers and fractions of Arabs, and Jamal Abdel Nasser was a big supporter of pan-Arab unity. One thing he actually did is he told the Jordanians and Palestinians that, listen, you are both Arabs, you shouldn't be fighting amongst each other, and our common enemy is Israel. So while he was alive, King Hussein and Yasser Arafat, etc., very often traveled to Cairo or their representatives, and he tried to tell them, he says, look, calm down, we shouldn't be fighting, Arabs shouldn't be fighting amongst each other. However, King Hussein saw the downfall of his own cousin in Iraq, Faisal II, and he was keeping an eye on the revolt which the people were doing against the kings. Remember, these were dictatorships. They were not, representatives of the will of the people. So then we get to the events, what we today know as Black September of 1971. What the Palestinians did, the Palestinians raised up in revolt against the Jordanians. King Hussein ordered the Jordanian army to crush the Palestinians. So on one hand, you had Jordanian army, which was pretty good, and also trained by Pakistan army. On the other hand, you had Palestinians, which were just basically a ragtag militia. The Jordanian army crushed the Palestinian revolt in their country against the government. So far, so good. The Syrians, on the other hand, had always backed Palestinian resistance. So Syrians were Shia rule, but they always backed Palestinians. They saw the Palestinian resistance being crushed in Jordan. What the Syrians did, they ordered the army to cross the border and invade Jordan. So at this point, Jordan had a problem because right now, this was an official Syrian army. They had Russian advisors, Russian tanks, and just picture this in 1960s and 70s. Russian armor, Russian supplied planes, ammunitions was still pretty good. Jordan had a problem. So Jordan had good relations with Israel. Jordan reached out to Israel to say, we are going to activate our air force, and this is not against you, but against Syrians. Israelis wanted to also counter Syrian Air Force. So Israelis told the Jordan Air Force, they said, go ahead and launch your missions. We are not going to attack you. And we're going to make sure that if Syrians revolt and activate their Air Force against you, we're going to shoot them down. So with the approval and the full knowledge of Israelis, the Jordan Air Force launched its missions against Syrian targets. Syrians knew about the capability of Israeli Air Force and they did not use their Air Force. Nevertheless, despite the actions of an overwhelming superiority and unopposed missions of Jordanian Air Force, Syrian tanks and columns still went and took control of a large swathes of desert in Jordan. This action was so swift that some of the armored columns of Jordanians and one of the generals, he abandoned his post. Having no choice, the King Hussein of the Jordanian army had developed personal relationships with then Brigadier Zia-ul-Haq, who was stationed in Jordan. He made a phone call to his personal friend Zia-ul-Haq and asked for support and intelligence report originally. General Zia-ul-Haq, who was a brigadier at that point, and I'm sorry, I'm not feeling too well, and sometimes my words are being mixed up. He was a brigadier at that time. He actually looked at the border areas and what the Syrians were doing and reported back to the president to say that the situation is dire, okay, and the Jordanian army is losing. King Hussein at this point asked for a favor for Brigadier Zia-ul-Haq to take over command of the 3rd Armored Division of the Jordanian Army. Zia-ul-Haq was a brigadier. He was being asked to take command of an armored entire division. So those who know military ranking system know that this is a little bit unusual. And also, Zia-ul-Haq was not there for that mission. What he did is he reached out to a certain Mr. Tayyab, who was, I think, an attaché, looking after the affairs between the government of Jordan, Pakistani, looking after the affairs between Jordan and Pakistan, and asked for policy clarification, saying, look, I'm here for a training mission, and they're asking me to take command of a armored division. And by the way, Brigadier Zia-ul-Haq came from, armored, corps of the Pakistan Army, so he had extensive experience in tank warfare and armored warfare. This was conveyed to the Defense Secretary of Pakistan. The Defense Secretary couldn't make a decision. He referred to the Defense Minister. The Defense Minister said, yeah, we have good relations with Jordan. Go ahead. At this point, the Brigadier Zia-ul-Haq took command of the 3rd Armored Division of the Jordanian Army. He formulated the strategy. He led the counterattack of the Jordanians on Syrians, on Jordanian grounds, and basically decimated Syrian tank columns. Here, I would like to point out some facts that Brigadier Zia-ul-Haq was an average soldier, an average brigadier. He was nothing extraordinary. However, his understanding of the armored corps, of the armored warfare, was way superior than anything either Syrian or Jordanians could put in. So he was able to formulate plans and being part of which decimated and pushed back Syrian military back into Syria from Jordanian lands. Now, the aftermath of this whole thing. Couple of things happened which were critical for us to understand what happens next. The Jordanian army pushed Palestinian refugees and Palestinian militants, those who were involved in the militancy against their government, into Lebanon. Lebanon at that time still is a majority Christian. Excuse me, not feeling too good today. Not majority Christian, but about 50% Christian and let's say about 50% Muslims. But those 50% Muslims were still divided into a Shia Sunni fraction. So the with a large influx of Palestinians, it exacerbated the already, you know, very divisive demographics of Lebanon, which resulted a few years later in Lebanese or Lebanon civil war, which still to this day, Lebanon in 2023 is still not stable. Okay, because of Israeli Air Force, doing deals with the Jordanian Air Force, the military ties or the ties between Jordan and Israel was further strengthened. The other Arab countries saw this, and they also overtures of Arabs towards Israeli started, and the ties strengthened. And what happened over the next few decades. The Palestinian militant struggle really was, dealt a blow by the Jordanian military. To be honest, the Palestinian militants was and were committing acts of terrorism on Jordanian soil, so the Jordanian military simply reacted. So here it is a full-fledged military against a bunch of ragtag militants. So that's what happened in the Middle East. In Pakistan, what happened is CIA noticed this person called Brigadier Zia-ul-Haq. Okay, he became a darling of both the CIA in America and also Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. So back when he came back to Pakistan, he was promoted out of order to become the Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan military against his senior and more competent officers of Pakistan Army, because what Bhutto saw is this guy who had obeyed the king of Jordan and helped him out, and he saw that this person is useful, and he saw Zia-ul-Haq as a loyal servant. Later on, many years later, of course, Zia-ul-Haq arrested Bhutto and hung him and gave him death sentence. Different story, but both the CIA noticed the value of having alliance with this brigadier and also Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in Pakistan. The issue of Zia-ul-Haq shooting and killing Palestinians is simply not true for a number of reasons. There's no direct evidence of that. Number two, while Zia-ul-Haq was ruling Pakistan, Yasser Arafat visited Pakistan multiple times, I think 3 times, and this issue was never raised. So if this was the case that Zia-ul-Haq had opened fire on the Palestinians, Yasser Arafat would have never done that. Number two, during the reign of Zia-ul-Haq, Palestinians were poured into Pakistan in the Pakistani education institutes, Pakistan military institutes, police, paramilitary, etc., to train them. This was also due to the Afghan war. That's true. Also, Zia-ul-Haq personally facilitated the coming of Abdullah Yusuf Azzam, who was a Palestinian scholar teaching in Saudi Arabia, to come and teach in the Islamabad Islamic University. The fourth thing that happened is, as I said, by and large, until the 80s and late 80s and early 90s, the struggle of Palestine was completely seen by everybody as an Arab issue. So if you look at the founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and his famous words in 1945, he says, the Muslims of India would not remain as mere spectators. They would help the Arabs in Palestine by all possible means. So during the time of Zia-ul-Haq, and we have to give credit where credit is due, the issue of Palestine was transformed in the Ummah, and particularly in Pakistan, from an Arab issue to an Ummah issue to a Muslim issue. So we have to give credit for that. And for what I can tell, and when I reviewed the material and books of the communication between Pakistani government in the 70s and stuff, there's no evidence that he actually shot and killed any Palestinians. Okay, he took command of the Jordanian army and he fought against the Syrians who had invaded Jordanian land, decimated their tank columns, and pushed the Syrians back into Syria. Jazakallah khairan, and again I apologize for some words that I've misspoken in this because I'm not feeling well. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.